All right, in this video, we're going to be using t-charts and functions, and I'm going to explain what that is, but we're going to connect it to what we did before with y and x intercepts. So when we look at this graph right here, we can see that it crosses the x-axis at this point, and it crosses the y-axis at that point right there. Let's try and see if we can name those points by their coordinates. So this point right here would be 3 to the left. So we would call that -3, comma, and then it did not go up or down at all. So -3, 0 would be the coordinate of that point, or the ordered pair representing that one. How about this one? Did it go left or right at all? No. So 0 left or right. And then did it go up or down from the origin? This is where we're measuring from. It went up 3, so it's going to be +3. And I'll assume that you're pretty comfortable identifying x and y intercepts at this point. So what we're going to do now is talk about t-charts. What is a t-chart? Well, first we're going to draw a t. And we're going to put x in this column and y in that column. And what this represents are the x coordinates with the corresponding y coordinates. So for this particular function, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit what a function is, but this particular graph and this particular equation, which is the equation for this graph, we have x values and their corresponding y values. We have at least two right here. Our x-intercept is -3, 0, because that's where it crosses the x-axis. So -3 is our x-coordinate and 0 is our y-coordinate. We know that that's 1. Okay, so how about this one? 0 is our x-coordinate and 3 is our y-coordinate. That is the y-intercept. But as you can see, there are actually an infinite number of points on this line. So let's find some other points. How about this one right here? Just looking at that graphically, we can see that it's 1 over and then 2 up. So 1 over to the left and then 2 up. So we're going to call that -1, 2. That's another point on this line. So let's add that to our t-chart. -1 for x. If -1 is x, 2 is what y is. Okay, let's pick another one. Let's go over here. Let's go 2 over this way. And then let's go up from there. And that is going to be another point. So it goes straight up from 2. So it goes 2 over. And then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up. So 2, 5, 2 comma 5. So that's going to be another coordinate. And you can see that for this particular equation, we have x values and their corresponding y values. All right. Now you can also see that if we just are given the x values and you were not able to see these y values, you could just take this, say for example, or this -1, plug it in here for x, substitute it in for x, and then what do you get out for y? But you get 2. So you can see that in that case, -1 plus 3 is 2, and that would be y. How about if you plug in 2 for x? 2 plus 3 is 5. So you can see how this works and what this represents. This is called a t-chart. You're going to be making these so that you can graph lines, okay? Now, we'll talk about how to graph lines when you're just given the equation, but for now, we're just going to start picking values on the t-chart. We're going to plug them into the equation, we're going to evaluate them, and then we're going to connect the dots to form a line. We don't always have to find just the x and y intercepts. Now, something else that we call this is this thing right here. It's called a function. A function. All right. Why is it called a function? Because it takes a number like x and it does something to it. In this case, this function will add 3 to whatever number it's given. Okay. So the notation that we use for functions is this, f of x. Guess what? It is exactly the same thing as y. So you can substitute in f of x for right here, this y, and it will be exactly the same thing. So that means that when I plug in -3 here, I get 0 out. When I plug in 0 here, I get 3 out. For functions, there is always an input and an output. So this t-chart is really a table of inputs. Those are the x's. And outputs. Those are the y's. Those are the y's. Or f of x. It's the same thing. So for some questions you're going to be given in your homework, you'll see something like f of x equals 2x plus 2. It's exactly the same. Oh, whoops, hang on. Let me just change that. X plus 3 to match what we have up here. X plus 3. And you're going to be asked to find, say, f of 5. Okay? All that means is you plug in 5 for wherever you see an x in the function. So f of 5 equals 5 plus 3 is 8. And that is how you evaluate the function for that particular value of x. So let's say I were to plug in 5 for x. Then my output would be 8. And you could find that right over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then that would go up. Well, this isn't completely drawn to scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, maybe it is. Okay. And then that would be our 0.58 right there. But we don't actually need to draw this graph. We can just use this equation and then a t-chart, and we can find all of our x's inputs and all of our y's outputs just from doing the equation, just doing the math right here. All right, let's look at this problem right here. Okay, so actually, instead of giving you the line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just basically tell you to make a t-chart given certain values. Okay, so you're gonna make an XY t-chart, a chart of inputs and outputs. So you input a number, the function does something to that number. In this case, it multiplies it by 2 and then it adds 2 to it. So let's just say we input -1 for x. Okay, so -1 goes right where the x is. So the y will be 2, we're just using this equation right here, 2 times -1, right where the x is, plus 2 equals, and then you can figure this out, that would be -2 plus 2 is 0. So whenever you have an input for this function, an input of -1, an output of 0. How about an input of 0? So that means you plug in or substitute 0 for x. And then really we would be finding our y-intercept here, right? So plus 2, I'm just using the same equation right here and right here and right here, right? And then I would get 2. So when I input -1 to this function for y, I get 0. When I input 0 for y, I get 2. How about if I input 1? Okay, so that would be 2. You plug in 1 for where the x is, and then plus the 2, finish that function. 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay, so 3 inputs for x, and picking -1, 0, and 1 are really good, solid inputs. And then solving for y with each of those inputs and making a table really helps. This is called a T-chart. Okay, so let's try and graph that with the T-chart. So when we have -1 for x, we have 0 for y. So right here, boom, that is 1 point right there. -1, 0. Okay, next we have 0 for x, 2 for y. 0 for x, 1, 2. There's our next point. And then when we have 1 for x, we have 4 for y. So 1 over, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 up for y. 1, so I'm going to write that over here. 1, 4 for that point right there. Now, we can see that this is starting to form a line. And like I had up top with this other graph, which I had already graphed for you, we can now draw a line for this second equation. So the graph of this equation, using a T-chart and just picking values for x and seeing what the corresponding y values are, makes a line just like this. So any point on this line will give us an input for x with its corresponding output. So let's say I just pick a point randomly up here. Okay, randomly up here. Okay, so it's in line with this point right here. So whenever y is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it looks like x is 3 over here. Okay, so for every x value, we have a corresponding y value. Okay, you plug in 3 for x, 2, 3 plus 2 equals 8, and you can see that point right there on the line. It even is drawn to scale. There it is. So any point on this line represents the input with its corresponding output, and you can write all those inputs and outputs in a table. The inputs are here. The outputs are here. Oops. As the y, the x is the input, the y is the output. Another way to write y is f of x. We call that f of x, not f times x, but f of x. If we are asked to evaluate this function, f of x equals 2x plus 2, which is exactly the same thing as what I just wrote in pink up here. We are given this, and we are asked to find f of -4, then that simply means you plug in -4 for x. So that would mean f of -4 equals 2 times -4 plus 2, just write exactly according to this equation, this function, equals 2 times -4 is -8, plus 2 is -6. So one of the points on our line here would be -4 and then -6. Input of -4, output of -6. This is a function.